The following is my conversation with Captain Ron Janix. Captain Ron is the co-owner, producer, and host of Contact in the Desert. Captain Ron has been immersed in the UFO and paranormal communities for many years. Through working with various conferences, reading and researching, and doing hundreds of interviews, he has built up an extensive knowledge of the subject. He began podcasting with Elevate the Conversation show back in 2014, and then moved on to Truth Be Told show along with Tony Sweet. In April of 2021, he founded the Observation Deck, an online source for information on speakers, as well as a place to host virtual events in and around the UFO community. In 2023, along with Gordon Pekrul, he bought the Contact in the Desert conference. Ron will be starting up a new podcast before the conference called Beyond Contact. He's a super down-to-earth guy, fun and informative, and in part responsible for the biggest UFO event this year, Contact in the Desert. So, the following is my conversation with Captain Ron Janix. Ron, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. And if it's okay with you, I'd just like to jump in and get an idea of where it all kind of started with you and what first piqued your interest in the UFO, UAP kind of phenomenon.
Yeah, for me, I've always sort of had an interest in this topic for some reason. I'm not one of those people that have had an experience, which a lot of people, speakers and attendees alike, they all have had a personal experience. It wasn't that for me. I just was always curious about it. And, I read Van Danigen's book, Chariots of the Gods, as everybody did, and Whitley Strieber's book, and Communion, of course, and these sort of things, and listening to Art Bell and those things back in the day. And I just always sort of had an interest in it. And then I'll tell you, a series of synchronicities sort of led me to start podcasting and started getting more involved. And then I kind of got involved in conferences and did more podcasting. And then I did an online platform called the Observation Deck, where we were basically mimicking a conference online during COVID. Right. So, and now here, lo and behold, I end up being involved with Contact in the Desert, which is really exciting for me.
Well, let's get into that then. I mean, I've got a few subjects I'd like to sort of touch on, but so Contact in the Desert, what's that about, and how do you kind of run that, and who kind of gets involved with it?
Contact in the Desert is sort of like the premier, biggest UFO conference there is, I think, and it takes place out in Coachella Valley here in Indian Wells specifically, right? Basically Palm Springs. And originally it was done actually in the desert. It was held in Joshua Tree National Park out in the desert there. And they would literally people would camp there. It was almost like a Burning Man kind of a thing. And they would bring in these speakers on these topics and people would come stay there and, do it, but it literally gets to be 110, 120 out there, and it kind of got too much. So they moved it into this beautiful Renaissance hotel out there. So we're still out in the desert, but we're in a beautiful hotel in the desert. Nice. And it's great because we take over the entire hotel, and all, the main speakers in this topic, we try to get the top people, the top researchers that are taking a serious look at this to come together and examine it. So it gives people an opportunity to hear firsthand from the great speakers and researchers and experiencers, as well as other contactees. We rent this entire hotel, so everybody there is part of our event. It's not like it's mixed in with other folks. It's everybody there is part of this. So you meet someone at the bar, in the bathroom, walking in, they're here for contact, so you can just start talking about UFOs, and it's just really a great atmosphere to collaborate with other people.
Yeah, it sounds it. So do you, when you kind of, how long has this been going on for? Has this been going for quite a while, and is it once a year?
Well, it's an annual thing, and it happens in the beginning of June. The very end of May this year, May 30th is our we have a 5-day event. All told, starts it on a Thursday and ends on Monday. And yes, it's an annual event. And with COVID, they had to shut down and everything. So this is the actual 10-year anniversary of the live event. So this will be the 10th time we're doing it live. And, Gordon and I took over just last year. So this will be like our first year all on our own. and it's the 10-year anniversary. So we really want to make it a special thing. Plus, there's a lot of things happening in this world right now, as you know, with, whistleblowers coming out, and Steve standing there saying disclosure's coming any minute. So, things are pretty hot for this topic right now. So we really want to make this a special event.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Yeah, so I mean, it is. What do you make of that? What do you make of the kind of? For me, it feels like there's a bit of a shift from. I mean, I've been following the subject for a while, and it seems quite supercharged now. Where previously people were talking about the subject, or some people were talking about the subject. It was quite niche at the time, whereas it's a lot more mainstream. I wouldn't say it's. I wouldn't use the term mainstream just yet, but it's getting that way.
Well, I feel like you're right. I think that is happening. I think it's certainly since 2017. I think just that alone has moved us. It was on 60 Minutes. It was in the New York Times. These things have certainly broadened the audience a little bit. Like mainstream. I know what you're saying. It's hard to put it in those terms, but it is more mainstream, more accepted, more easily talked about, and less criticized, I think. However, I feel like people have made up their mind. It's that old thing I like to say that Stanton Friedman used to say, which was, "Don't bother me with the facts. My mind has been made up."
Yeah.
I do feel that most people that I come across are either followers and believers, or they absolutely just don't. They have no interest in the subject. They're not willing to take the time to look at it. This is my own personal little mission, is that I feel like there's enough happening out there that we've got thousands of sightings. We've got thousands of contactee reports. We've got, credible things. We've got people at Harvard like John Mack and of course, Avi Loeb. And these kind of people. Why do we just dismiss this because it's UFOs? Mm-hmm. It's like when the U.S. government made that such a taboo thing and they ridiculed you so bad, that really worked because people are still afraid of that. And I feel like, why do we just dismiss these things? There's something here. I don't know what it is. I take a very healthy skeptical look at these things. However, I don't just dismiss it out of hand. Why would thousands upon thousands of people have these claims? There must be something there. I always point to the deathbed confessions we get out of the Roswell case. Why would these guys, a former colonel in the Army, write a deathbed confession to his granddaughter that he wants her to know this is real? Well, is that a hoax?
Yeah.
That guy's not hoaxing that. So what is it? I don't know, but come on, there's something there. And I don't like the way people just dismiss it out of hand. No, that's garbage. I feel like that's not being fair to the topic. I think it certainly warrants more examination and scientific study. And that's sort of our mission.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on a really good point, and I was thinking about this the other day, that you've got these people that have had their whole careers in the military, the Air Force, or whatever, and they've got the bravery awards, and they've got these fantastic stories of how they've been really patriotic and helped support and keep the country safe. Why would they ruin all of that? Because if you look at if they had a Wikipedia page, if you came out and said, "Look, I've seen this, or I've been told this, I've got this information about UFOs," that would just be at the top. That you would be that UFO guy. It doesn't make sense that somebody would kind of almost damage their career, their credibility, their history, so to speak, with a UFO story, unless there's something in it. Unless there's something there.
Absolutely. And even the resume of these guys like John Mack, like Avi Loeb, these guys got to the top of the top, man. I mean, you're running departments at Harvard. You don't get there because you don't know what you're talking about. So then when John Mack writes a book saying that, look, I've studied this and these people are not delusional, that's not what it is, it's something else. Why do we just dismiss it? Why don't we feel like, hey, let's pay attention to this guy or these military guys? Why are they compelled to in the face of all the ridicule, they still want to come out and tell it? There's something there. Why can't we respect it? Suddenly we don't respect these guys. We turn to these experts for a reason, and then when they say something about UFOs, it's like, oh well, we'll just dismiss it. That doesn't make any sense.
What do you make of so we're looking at something like the Soul Foundation, Galileo Project, and kind of non-kind of government organizations that are kind of looking at collecting and potentially disclosing information to the public. Do you feel that we're going to get some kind of disclosure from the government, or do you think that we're not, and it's going to be potentially from these kind of private or non-government related organizations? Or do you think that, where do you see that going?
Well, I think both of these things are outstanding. The Soul Foundation is amazing. Galileo Project's amazing. I'm thrilled that these things are happening. Steve Bassett will kill me because, of course, he feels like we're going to get actual big D disclosure from the federal government. And boy, he makes a compelling case, and I respect all the work that Steve has done. However, no, you're asking me personally. I just cannot see any reason for them to disclose. What is the advantage to give this information out? All you're doing is asking for trouble. All you're doing is opening up a can of worms. All you're doing is providing reasons for them to say, well, you lied to us about Roswell. You lied to us about this. It's just nothing but trouble. So I personally do not see big D disclosure coming out and being announced. And now the way I feel, and the world's gone so crazy, I feel if the president came out, if he didn't have the ship and the bodies right there, and he just said this happened, a huge segment of the population wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Even if the president came out and said, by the way, we've got a spaceship and they would say, well, let's see it. They still wouldn't believe it. So I don't think there's any reason for the government to do this. I don't think that there's enough pressure on them. I don't think they have any compulsion to do so. I don't think there's any strategic advantage in doing that unless somebody else is going to disclose, or there really is an alien presence here and they're going to make themselves known and we're somehow tipped off to that. Without those things, I don't personally see that happening. So we have to find other ways to get as close as we can to the truth. And the Soul Foundation is one. A lot of the speakers we have at Contact in the Desert, they're moving the needle forward. They're trying to get us as far down the road and learn as much as we can. And that's what I want to know, man. Before I die, I want to know what's really happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
Getting old and I want to know. That's how I feel. It still feels like it's moving glacially to me, even though we've made a lot of progress. I love that term. It's glacially, like it's just painfully slow for me. I would really like to see this ramp up. There's so much that could probably come out.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you're watching the kind of vintage clips from several years back of some of the people that were involved, as you say, John Mack and some others, those guys aren't about anymore, and it's kind of sad, isn't it? They were really fighting for some kind of an understanding of disclosure in some form or another, and they're not here now.
It's a big problem in this community is we've lost a lot of the top guys, from Stanton Friedman, Jim Mars, John Mack. A lot of these guys are dying off, and it's really a shame. Hopefully some new younger folks will pick it up and run with it.
Do you get a sense of what, I know it's a really speculative question. I know people don't like to kind of hang their coat on one particular.
I like to say, look, we're talking about unknowns here. So nothing we're saying is these are all guesses. These are all speculation. That's how I feel about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So do you get a sense of, has your kind of opinion narrowed to one kind of area? So we get in the kind of the UFO field, people that kind of are involved and talk about it. And again, I hate to use the term community because UFO community, because I think it's bigger than that now. And certainly moving into different areas of culture, I guess. But there's this big debate between interdimensional and extraterrestrial. And I know that Anna Paulina Luna, the congresswoman, had recently come out after the SCIF meeting saying lots of things around interdimensional. I know that Grush seemed to be moving in that direction in a lot of things that he was saying, although he wouldn't be specific about which kind of area. He was quite kind of vague. Have you narrowed down your opinion? I think that potentially this is what we're seeing, or multiple things. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know the answer to any of these things, as I stated. So, but what I would say is that for me, it's I still kind of live in the old school space of, I know it's moved from the nuts and bolts UFOs to it's probably more interdimensional or vibrational or whatever the terms that different people use. But I feel, to me, it's a bigger leap religions often require this supernatural occurrence and these magic things to happen. Where I live is that I kind of try to take a very logical, open approach to this, even though I'm very skeptical. I do have an open minded to this. So I feel it's more likely. Look what we've done with technology. So I feel like, if the universe is 13 billion years old and our Earth is only 5 billion, somebody's got to jump on us by a lot of time. So, given more time to develop more technology, I would think it's very 3D world, Newtonian thing to build a ship that can travel that distance in the future, just technology and time to do that. So I think, to me, that's the most accessible belief, is that they could just fly here from another star system. Now, uh, interdimensional, boy, that's like another leap of, oh, it's that much harder to accept. And then you get into time travel. Oh shit, that's really hard for me to. So the further you get away from 3D real world stuff, the harder it is for me to get my head around it. I know that some of the top guys are saying that that's really what it is, and maybe that is, but I stick to, for me, it's easier to accept this, and I like to kind of bring people in. Let's start here, and maybe it is something more advanced and more complicated than we even realize, but I like to stick with just technology and time.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you, and I think it's really difficult for people to kind of take that leap to something that don't, because you can understand extraterrestrial. You can understand, well, they're like us. They're from really really far away. Obviously, there's going to be another planet that's similar to us. They've got technology. They're advanced, a few years more advanced than us. You can get your head around that, and you can kind of accept it, I think. But if you say to people, well, it's interdimensional, well, what's interdimensional? Well, it's kind of, it's such a difficult one for people to comprehend, that it's like, I'm not going to think about that. I'm maybe on board with ET, but I can't get on board with anything else.
And something else I'll add to this, Jimmy, is that I think this whole new idea, we have a big segment at Contact about artificial intelligence, and that's a new term for us, and it's a new way of looking at things for us. And I feel like, common sense wise and just logically thinking these things through, doesn't that make more sense that you wouldn't send a biological entity? You would send something that has to eat, sleep, dies, gets sick. You would send, just like we're going to from NASA, send an artificial intelligence, self-learning computers that can travel this distance. And they say how, like, these 90-degree turns, well, a human's brain would go shooting out the side of their head. Right. Well, maybe, but maybe there's not a biological entity on there. Maybe this is just an artificial, like, probe type thing, which would, what we would do, that would
Yeah.
send back data that has these capabilities. That's very logically reasonable to me. That's not even a big leap to me. It's not hard to go there, to think we're going to be doing that very soon. NASA's going to send artificially intelligently controlled things out in the universe. We have the Voyager out there already from 1970. I know that's not AI, but that thing was still giving us data. So why wouldn't we do this? And why wouldn't that be the most likely way another civilization would try to look at our planet? That logically makes sense to me in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think about the kind of whole SpaceX and the Optimus, and I've been following Tesla and SpaceX and Elon Musk and stuff, and we get quite a lot of the press over here, and his kind of plans for the future with Mars, and I love all the kind of space stuff and have done for a long time.
Misidentify his satellites
Yeah,
as UFOs. That's a big thing too that
yeah,
happens.
absolutely, yeah. But so Elon Musk's plan is supposedly to kind of create these, and I could be getting this wrong, so excuse me if I'm, but it's to create these kind of Optimus bots, or a version of that. And so when he wants to eventually colonize Mars, you send off the Starship with a load of kind of robots with, AI minds that can kind of create and build and do all the dangerous stuff without humans having to go there. And once it's finally built, then we can go and hang out there and a bit of tourism and potentially live there. But that's not that far-fetched, because that's his plan, or as close to it. So why wouldn't you?
100 years from now, not even 10,000 years from now, 100 years from now.
Yeah.
I'm late to the game on this, but I just saw the other day they have you seen this text to video?
Yes. Yeah.
That's insanity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really incredible to me. So it's like, where's that going to be in 10 years or 100 years?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with my dad actually yesterday that it won't be long before you can say to your TV, "I want to watch a film where there's a protagonist who's called Bob, and he goes here and does it, and it will just go boom and create a film for you, specifically designed for you."
That's a great notion that I've never had, Jimmy. I like that a lot. I mean, and then you could be the hero.
Yeah.
You want to see a fantasy movie of a sword yielding person doing these things? You know what I mean? I can imagine that being. Oh wow! I
Yeah.
bet that's probably maybe not my lifetime, but I bet that's right around the corner, man.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, if you look at I know slightly off topic, but if you look at ChatGPT and OpenAI, you could drop a prompt in there, write me a book about X, Y, and Z, and I want this to be in there, and it will just do it in seconds. You think if it can do that, and it's moving towards being able to do that with video, it might not be that far away,
Right.
which is another concern for things like UFO videos because I get sent a lot to my Instagram page, lots of UFO videos, and you'll find that the ones that aren't very good are probably the most likely to be real, in as much as they're real unknown objects, and they could be misidentified. But whereas the really good quality stuff that's like, wow, that's incredible, that's probably CGI. Not always, but quite often. But then
Right.
now with this software, you're like, oh god, it's going to be a minefield.
And that is a shame because I really, in our little world, community, if you will, the onset of Photoshop and virtual reality and all of these things just opens the door for fakes. And of course, everybody wants to do a fake on this, and they go viral and all that. And it's a real shame because now we've lost that. So it's it makes other people outside of this community immediately dismiss it. Immediately they've got it out. Oh no, that's Photoshop. That's chat to video. That's whatever. And it is that easy. So it's a real shame. It's a real problem for us. So
Yeah.
now I like when there's different people at different locations that see the same thing. That's nice, but you don't get a lot of those.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, I spoke to Ezra Kelderman, who's the project manager for Project Galileo, really cool guy, and he kind of runs the day-to-day stuff for Avi Loeb, and he's obviously they're as you say they're doing some great work, but I think it's something like that, that kind of technology which is just looking up. It's not Arrow or the government kind. We don't have to rely on them to be honest with us. These kind of organizations with the technologies that just look up, we're going to have to rely on them because they're credible. It's a Harvard-based thing, um, for me, that they're the most exciting kind of organizations out there, and
I agree. I
um,
agree.
on that subject. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Um, I'm interested in knowing. Do you? Let's say, for example, we had I don't know, Joe Biden come out and say, this is what we've got. A bit of hard D disclosure, or a catastrophic disclosure from somewhere. What do you see that doing to us, to humanity? Have you any kind of thoughts on what would actually happen if we did get something? We did get some documents that came out that said, yeah, there's non-human intelligence living amongst us. How
Well,
would that
immediately, I think
impact
a
us?
lot of people won't again believe that,
Yeah.
right? So immediately there's a segment that won't believe it. But as you pointed out earlier, I feel like this is, my mom knows about UFOs now, kind of. You know what I mean? It's kind of in the mainstream. It's kind of out there. I don't think it would be as catastrophic as it was in 1947 when everybody went, "Holy cow!" Like we were barely flying airplanes. You know what I mean? Let alone uh, spaceships from across the world. That was probably a real stretch for them. It was a different mindset, I would imagine, in 1947. And here you go. Nowadays, I think it's so ingrained in the pop culture. Do you watch the? Well, you maybe didn't watch the Super Bowl, but we had the Super Bowl here. There were like 5 major commercials that had UFOs featured in them in our thing. that the Super Bowl is as mainstream as it gets, man. That's American apple pie. That's it.
Yeah.
So now here you go. The advertisers had 5 different commercials that focused on or around UFOs, aliens, whatever. I thought that was incredible. So I don't think it would be quite as dramatic, certainly as it would have been, 60, 70, 80 years ago. I think that people already kind of have in the back of their mind, even if they're not super on board with this, they might go, "Oh shit, maybe that's real after all," kind of a thing, as opposed to what? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I don't think it'll be the shock
Mm.
to everyone as previously advertised, and maybe that's part of the grand plan. Who knows? It's so hard to say what everybody in governments know and everything, but maybe that is part of the thing. Working with Hollywood and whatever to kind of get everybody used to this idea, sort of thing, and wouldn't be that big surprise to me.
I think, I mean, I've had lots of conversations with people. I mean, I'm not, the first, when I start talking to someone, the first thing I say is, I'm really into UFOs. It's kind of one of those, you kind of test the water to see if they're interested in the subject, any kind of paranormal stuff. And then you kind of, once you've tested the waters, then you can start talking openly about stuff. But I've found that when I speak to people and I kind of get into the subject, and certainly when I'm around more than one person, they're kind of a little standoffish, like, "Oh, you're interested in that? Are you okay?" But then when you get them alone later, they'll make a point of saying, "You know what, I do think there's something to that, and I've always thought that we're not alone." And I think that goes, across generations and across cultures. I think that's always in the back of people's heads, but it's because of that stigma that they're kind of a bit cautious until they know you're on board first. To kind of,
Agreed. And let me say this to Jimmy. This is a story I used to always tell people that something they're like, "Well, what have you found after?" I've done, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of interviews, and so when I meet somebody or I'm talking to somebody that I don't know, I will they'll ask, "Do you have a podcast or whatever?" And then it'll be like, "Well, yeah, we talk about UFOs and these kind of things," and they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I don't have." This is typically what happens. I mean, I can't even tell you. You've probably had this experience. How many times has this happened to me? Where they will immediately, when I say, "Well, I talk about UFOs and related subjects on my show," they will say, "Oh yeah, I don't have any interest in that. I think that's all nonsense. I'm not a believer at all." And I swear to God, they inevitably do that Columbo thing where they go, there's this one time my dad and I were fishing late at night and this UFO came over, or they'll say, I was walking home one time, it's amazing how many people have one story. It's like, well, there was this one time I did see something and I don't know what it was. It was pretty wild. Even though they're not into it, they're not a believer, they're not in the community, just run of the mill guy you meet on an elevator or whatever. It's amazing how often I run into somebody who, I don't mean run into them at a conference. I mean run into them at Target shopping for TVs, and they just somehow they saw my shirt or whatever, and then it comes up and they've had an experience, and I find that fascinating. Do you have that experience?
absolutely, the exact same experience. Yeah,
It's incredible.
but it's almost like there'll be that kind of, I don't believe in that stuff, that's silly, but I've had this experience and I saw this thing, and so you're describing something that it seems impossible based on our physics and our science and our history. So you are a believer. Oh no, I'm not a believer, but you've had that, Oh,
Witness, I'm not, and yet I'm open to it, and you're not. So what's wrong here? There's
yeah.
this weird disconnect. I don't know. Whoever did this disinformation campaign did a great job. I mean, I think they really shut down this whole idea. And that's another problem we have in this community. It's the misinformation, the disinformation, the fake videos, the fake pictures, the fake stories, the elaborators, the delusional people. I mean, it's tough. And then you'll hear somebody else. Here's another one: is you'll someone will be telling me their story, and I'm on board. I'm like, wow, that's pretty believable. That's a pretty credible guy coming from a pretty and then at the end it's something just unimaginably ridiculous. Well, how'd you find this out? Well, I had a banana and it told me this morning or something. And I'm like, what? And then it just ruins it for me because it's like, oh, you had me. And then, oh, man.
Then you lost me.
Now it's less exciting and less credible and less. So it's so hard to say, you know. It's tough dealing in this realm of unknowns continuously.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. People ask me, well, where's a good place for me to kind of start to look into this kind of subject? And I'm interested in where would you kind of send somebody or direct somebody that's
The contact in the desert and go to one of these events. It's so not what people think it is in their head. It is so much more, certainly at least this event is so much more of an academic, scientific, intellectual party, because it's also a lot of fun, than people think. It is not at all tinfoil hat craziness, which it's funny how people think that's what it is. That's the connotation. Oh, a UFO conference? Oh my God, how wacky. It's not at all that. It's certainly Contact in the Desert is way more cerebral than people realize. Much more normal people than you would think. Believe it or not, when I know exactly what you're saying, and when I approach people about this, I know it's a bit cliched, but I feel I always recommend for example, the Don Schmidt Roswell books. He's got I forgot the title now, the encyclopedia, whatever the big thing on Roswell was. I think a regular rational person that wants to be fair about things reads through that book and they find out that there's hundreds and hundreds of direct witnesses that all have little pieces of this puzzle that all fit in and push that narrative forward. That is an extremely credible case with an extreme number of witnesses and direct eyewitnesses and ancillary people. And there's so many things involved. It is very hard to dismiss that out of hand to me. So I like to have people start there and say, well, take a look at that. That's what I feel like. That's the strongest, most obvious case with the most material about it. So it's a little cliched, but it's the one that has the most documented things, thanks to the work of those guys, Thomas and Don.
yeah, yeah,
What do
absolutely.
you recommend to people?
Well, it's a good one. I think it's I think you for the younger, let's say, well, the younger generation. I'm 41 now, so I'm not part of the younger generation anymore. I like to think I feel like I'm 21, but I'm not. Um, I think it's when you ask people that are, let's say, I don't know, 20 or younger to go and look at Roswell, it's like, oh, it's old fashioned, old fashioned. And it's hard to get them on board. And go, no, it's a fascinating case. And there's loads of evidence and there's loads of witnesses. And it's a really great case to get, to dig into. I think they find that really difficult. And you've kind of got to be really engaged to do that. And there will be people that do, but I kind of feel like you need a kind of an easier kind of entry in that kind of just some light stuff.
Like,
So I would think that some of the very new stuff that's coming out of Soul Foundation, for example, some of the new testimonies, some of the new slides. If you were just to watch the footage as someone that's brand new into it, you've seen an interview with David Grush, you've seen Congress talking about it, thinking, "What's this? This is interesting. I've always had a bit of an interest in this, but all of a sudden this stuff's in the press. Let's dig into it." And I think if you look at your conference is a prime example. You've got these people that are really credible who are saying this is happening, and I'm talking about it from a scientific perspective, from a an evidence-based perspective. Soul Foundation, Galileo, etc. It's something it's hard to disregard. And if you're thinking critically and you're interested in the subject anyway, you've got just enough of the kind of paranormal, unusual, strange, I want to learn mystical stuff, as well as the very scientific and the credibility of these people. So it's kind of two in one. And I almost feel like you
describe it
need
better than I do, man. I need you to do a commercial for us because that's exactly right. That is well put.
thanks. But yeah, so it gets them interested, and then I think once you've got them then they'll look at they'll start going back in cases.
You know, it makes perfect sense. I agree. Roswell feels kind of old and tired-ish to a new person. I get that. But what I don't like to do is tell people, I don't want to jump too fast. I don't want to say, "Hey, look at the Peruvian mummies,"
Yeah.
because you know what? That seems like there might be something kind of legit there, but I mean, that could come out a year from now and go, "Oh, it turns out it was these monkeys or something," and then they'll dismiss the whole topic. The good news about Roswell is this has been vetted and plowed over and researched, and there's 70 books. We kind of know what happened on what day to who. I mean, it's pretty solid. You know, I mean, the only ambiguous stuff is was it really an alien ship, or was it one of our ships, or was it clearly something crashed? Clearly something happened. Clearly all of these other things, all the ancillary stuff is solid. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I never like when the jellyfish video. Did you guys see that? Well, it just came out. Let's slow your roll. And I don't like how immediately, if it's something we don't recognize, whatever it is, aliens.
Mm.
Slow down. That doesn't mean it's aliens. Well, why do we jump to alien? Let's jump to everything else first, and then when we can't find out, it's not this, it's not that. Maybe it is alien. You know what I mean? I don't like when that's the first option. So I think there needs to be a blend between. I agree with your Roswell thing, but I'm nervous about giving them stuff too new. I do like the congressional hearing stuff. Here's guys testifying under oath to Congress. Is this a hoax? Are they fooling around? I don't think so.
Yeah. No, you make a really good point, and I think it's because it's so well vetted. That's I hadn't thought of that actually, and you make a really good point that here's a case that's so well vetted, and it's been studied to. You couldn't study it. I mean, you can study it more, but you almost couldn't study it anymore. It's just been everyone's had a pop at it, and yeah, it's such a credible case. You're absolutely right. The stuff from Congress obviously filtered back to us in the UK, and there were a few news organisations that picked it up, and it was fascinating. Like I had this conversation with my dad, and my dad, he would, if I'd have said to him 5 years ago, I'm doing a podcast on UFOs and I'm interested in this, was don't be silly, it's ridiculous, and that just don't waste your time on that sort of stuff. Whereas now we're having conversations and completely believe David Grush. This is a massive shift and he's one of the most skeptical people that I've probably ever met. And you know, David Grush, you can't argue with his credibility. He's a person who would have been in a position to receive that kind of information. He doesn't seem to have an ulterior motive, and he's said this under oath in Congress on camera. I mean, that's earth shattering.
It coincidentally, that story broke on News Nation that you mentioned during our contact conference last year, which was so perfect. So we all kind of like piled into one room, and we had Danny Sheehan and Richard Dolan like kind of moderate and kind of give their thoughts after hearing him talk. So that was a very exciting moment, and hopefully he's just the tip of the iceberg, because supposedly there's a few other guys ready to come out, ready to testify before Congress. That the problem with Grush's stuff, and I agree, is that most all of it is secondhand. Oh, I heard this guy say, I saw this guy talk about this and that. We want to get the next level guy, the guy that saw the body or saw the ship or was on the thing, whatever. That's what we'd really like to get. And hopefully that's coming. I mean, there's certainly rumor mill is floating around that's coming next in Congress. I'd love it. Yeah. I don't want them to go up there and just go, well, I'll talk about that privately, like they constantly do. It's like, so disappointing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that might be all we get. I don't think we're going to get what we want. I'm very pessimistic about that. I just don't see it. I don't see it. Why would they allow that?
Yeah, there's too much. See, the one thing that really stands out, and I was thinking a lot about this, is that if the government had recovered craft and they'd given it to one particular or a couple of private companies, the financial side of it. So people are sort of focusing quite a lot on the how how would people react to the lying and to finding out, and would there be mass hysteria? It could be even simpler. It could literally be lawsuits. It could come down to, well, Lockheed Martin received this and Boeing didn't, and now Boeing's going to go after them for $1 trillion because they didn't get the the contract, and the not the contract, but the well, I suppose the contract.
Yeah, it could be the contract. That's an excellent point, Jimmy. I agree with you. I think that's an excellent point. I would add to this. What about, you destroyed my grandfather's life? I mean, he was so afraid of talking about this that he sat in a chair for the last 30 years of his life, or he couldn't get a job because he talked about this. Or think about all the lawsuits. I mean, exactly. So you and I could probably come up with hundreds of reasons not to disclose. What's the one, two, why? What is the advantage for them? I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the advantage for them to come clean. If they do know all this stuff, why would they? If they really did have this stuff and they really knew all this, what is the advantage just for no reason at all to go, here you go? I just don't see it. So I feel like, unfortunately, it's going to be a long, slow battle.
Yeah. What's it like? So obviously you get the get-togethers with all of these people that are kind of just UFO royalty. What's it kind of like being at one of your events and everyone just mingling around? And because for me, I'm online. I'm very rarely. I never. I think I've spoken to one of my podcast guests in person, and that's it. What's it just like mingling with these people?
It's unbelievable. It's life-changing. It really is an amazing thing, because everybody makes this pilgrimage out there. And so you're all meeting in Palm Springs out in the desert. It's really remarkable, and it's amazing how many people tell me how much it's changed their life. Even though I'm new to this role at Contact, it's amazing how many people do say, "How, boy, oh my God." I personally, going back to 2016, I guess, I've been saying that's my favorite week of the year. It's an incredible thing because there's so much going on. There's like 7 or 8 stages of lectures happening at any minute. So you can, see one or go to a panel in the main room or see one of the things. And then there's like breakout rooms where you get workshops where you could sit in a small room with Richard Dolan and almost have not quite one-on-one, but like this small, intimate time with him. And then there's on Monday, they do these intensives that are like 2.5 hours long. What an opportunity to sit down with these top guys. And it's not only that, it's the in-between time. Then they all go to the bar and you get to casually talk to these guys. That's what was the big thing for me. I went to the very first Contact in the Desert when it was still in the desert, all by myself. I just saw the flyer and said, all these guys are here. I can't not go to this. I went all the way out there by myself. And I swear to God, the true story is that I went there by myself. I was just, I think, I don't even know if I had my podcast or had done anything at this point. And I was walking around, and I'd walk around, and I'm walking through these paths on dirt because it was in the desert. And I realized I'm walking next to Nick Pope. Him and I are just walking by ourselves all the way. And then I started talking, and it was like so cool that I had like this moment with him, And then later on, you're hanging out and you get to meet these other guys and kind of talk sort of off record with them, you know what I mean? And kind of casually man to man talk to people. And it's just really a treat. And then also talking to other attendees who have similar experiences or similar interests. Like I can imagine you and I having a beverage at the bar and talking about all these things and these different stories. I think it's really amazing. There's all these things happening at the same time. So it just feels very exciting. And you never know who's going to walk there. And then there's people that maybe aren't speaking on stage, but they're like a high level speaker too. They just come to Contact because they want to hang out with these guys. And it's really terrific. One quick thing I want to note, you mentioned royalty. Exactly. We're specifically, for the first time ever this year, we're going to have a panel called the Legends Panel. And it's going to be like the legends of ufology. and we're going to have George Norrie, Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, Travis Walton, Russell Targ, like just these top people, just because a tribute to them, sort of. We're going to have this legends thing. So I think that's kind of really neat. How else can you do that? And seeing and being there live. And then oftentimes, I'm sure on that panel and in these intimate rooms I was talking about, these speakers will do what they call AMAs. Ask me anything. What a cool thing. You know, I watch these guys on those TV shows. I watch them do their lectures or whatever, and then you get to ask them anything.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And most of them are very gracious about it, and they'll answer anything pretty much straight up. That's really a great, unique experience. So that's sort of my takeaway of that event.
It sounds incredible. It really does. And I can imagine for people attending, people that have had this, either an experience themselves or they're fascinated by the subject, but certainly people that have had an experience, to be able to mingle with other people of, like-minded people must be incredible, because it's, with a lot of people, it's a part of their life that they tend to kind of keep suppressed or hidden, or that, they won't be open about unless they know somebody else is open to talking about it. So it must be great for people to be able to just mingle with like-minded people.
This is something another little quick anecdote that I always tell is that we have a thing there, J. Christopher King does, called the Experiencer Group, where people who have had an experience will go together and they talk amongst themselves. And this is a great opportunity for that. And we don't film it or anything. It's a private thing. And it's open to everybody anytime throughout this thing. But I was going to say, the example of what you're saying is Whitley Strieber. I remember him early on saying that when he had this strange experience happen to him, the hardest thing for him was, I remember him saying how, you know what, if you're raped in New York City, there's a plethora of places to go. There's church groups, there's rape victim organizations, there's women groups. 7 days a week, you could go get support from like-minded people who have had a similar traumatic experience and can work with you and help you through it and know the steps. When this happened to him, he's like, who do I talk to? Where do I go that other people go, oh yeah, I saw a bug at the end of my bed this morning too at 4 a.m. It just didn't happen. There was nowhere to go. So that is an important element and an aspect to these type of things, that there is an outlet to share with other people who have maybe had the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people wanted to come to the event, where would they go? Where is the best for people to come and find you? Talk about your kind of podcast. Where would they find that?
Everything's contactinthedesert.com. Contactinthedesert.com. And all our dates are on there. All our speakers are on there. My podcast page is on there. Everything's on there, ready to go. And it's really great. Would love to have people come out and join us. I mean, this is the other thing about this event. It truly, genuinely is like this organic thing that sort of happens. I know we're programming the event, kind of. We do, but like all the speakers are like, well, what do you want me to talk about? And it's like, I never want to tell them that. Whatever you think your current latest thing is, that's it. Usually that's the case. We want these guys to have the freedom to do that. And we want attendees to participate and interactive. So it's sort of like this group thing. And it's amazing how this pilgrimage out to Palm Springs, so many people just feel, a lot of people come by themselves and you feel very welcome. And next thing you know, you've got friends that and you get in these groups and everything. It's really cool.
Awesome. Well, look, that's I think a great place to kind of wrap it up there. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I really hope we stay connected, get another chance to talk again in the future.
Absolutely, brother. I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Take care of yourself. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jimmy.